When did it happen that the people who were once your daily reasons started turning into silence, weeks without a call, months without a visit, and you found yourself staring at your phone, wondering if you did something wrong or if you simply stopped mattering? Maybe you tell yourself it's normal, that life goes on, that children grow up, but still something hurts, because it's not just about physical absence. It's about that feeling of being pushed to the sidelines, of giving more than you receive, of loving without knowing whether that love still reaches the other side. And the most unsettling part is that no one ever taught you what to do when the bond changes and the heart keeps waiting, like it always did. My name is Gabriel. I've spent many years studying and practicing Stoicism as it applies to everyday life, and I'm also a father. On this channel, we reflect together on relationships, boundaries, and emotional dignity in maturity. If this topic resonates with you, I invite you to stay until the end of this video and subscribe, because what we're going to work on today may give you back something you might feel you've been losing over time: calm, clarity, and respect for yourself. What if the silence were not a betrayal, but also not something you should ignore? Because one thing is accepting that children grow up, and something very different is normalizing the fact that they disappear without explanation, leaving parents carrying questions no one answers. This first point, when your children's silence is not an accident, is essential to stop moving back and forth between confusion and guilt. Many mature adults live through this moment alone. No one tells them that something truly changed. One day, the calls become less frequent, visits are postponed, and replies arrive late or don't arrive at all. The mind starts working against them, inventing stories, revisiting past mistakes, wondering where they failed as parents. Stoicism teaches us to pause here, because before judging yourself or justifying everything, you need to look at the facts with sobriety. The fact is simple and at the same time hard. There is distance. There is no need to decorate it or dramatize it, but neither should it be denied. Marcus Aurelius said that we are not disturbed by things themselves, but by the judgments we make about them. The problem is not only that your children don't call, but everything you tell yourself because of that silence. When you don't distinguish between what is happening and what you imagine, suffering multiplies. This silence can have many causes, some understandable, others less so. Life rhythms, emotional immaturity, lack of awareness, even comfort. What matters here is not finding quick excuses or automatic culprits, but recognizing that something in the bond has shifted. And when something shifts, the response cannot be to keep acting as if nothing has changed. Many parents react impulsively. They call more, insist, send messages loaded with affection or reproach disguised as care. They believe this will restore the bond, but in reality, it often reinforces the distance. Epictetus warned that we are not responsible for the actions of others, but we are responsible for how we respond to them. This is where that responsibility begins. When the silence is not an accident but a pattern, the first act of dignity is to see it clearly. Not to shut yourself off, not to harden your heart, but to stop living in a passive waiting that wears you down. This recognition does not break love. It puts it in order. It takes you out of the place of someone begging for attention and brings you back to the center from which you can choose how to act. Accepting that something is no longer working as it once did is the starting point for any sensible action. As long as you keep denying it or explaining everything through guilt, you will remain trapped in the same pain. This first step does not solve the problem, but it frees you from confusion, and without clarity, there is no possible peace. Guilt does not make you a better father or a better mother. It only makes you more tired. And yet, it is the first thing that appears when children pull away. This second point, parental guilt, is a trap, not a compass, maybe one of the hardest to face, because for years you were taught that feeling guilty was proof of love. Many mature parents live with a kind of permanent inner trial. They replay conversations from decades ago, decisions made with the information and energy they had at the time, and judge them with today's awareness. The mind says, if I had done this differently, if I hadn't worked so much, if I had been softer or firmer. But Stoicism is very clear about this. You cannot demand from your past self the wisdom that can only be gained by living. Seneca warned that there is nothing more unjust than punishing yourself endlessly for mistakes that have already served their purpose. Raising children is not about writing a perfect manual, it is about improvising with love in the middle of uncertainty. Pretending that everything went wrong just because they don't call today is a convenient conclusion for guilt, but a deeply false one. Your children's adult lives are not an audit of your worth as a parent. Here it is important to understand something from modern psychology. Healthy guilt helps correct a present behavior. Chronic guilt, on the other hand, corrects nothing. It only paralyzes. When your children are already adults, guilt stops being a tool and becomes a burden. It does not make you more emotionally available, it makes you more dependent on their approval. I want you to observe something honestly. How many times have you tried to compensate for that guilt by being excessively understanding, giving up boundaries, accepting silences that hurt you, justifying absences that wound you? That is not conscious love. It is fear of losing what little remains of the bond, and fear never builds healthy relationships. Viktor Frankl said that between stimulus and response, there is a space, and in that space lies our freedom. Your children's silence is the stimulus. Automatic guilt is a learned reaction. But you still have that inner space to choose a different response, one that does not humiliate you or harden you, one that restores your dignity. Freeing yourself from guilt does not mean loving less. It means loving without whipping yourself. It means recognizing that you did the best you could with who you were at the time, and that today your task is not to pay an endless debt, but to live with coherence and self-respect. Without that clarity, any attempt to reconnect is born crooked because it comes from need rather than calm. Is it possible to love without chasing, to be present without insisting, to care for the bond without disappearing yourself in the process? This is one of the deepest questions when children are already adults and begin to pull away. Because this is not about stopping loving, it is about learning to love in a different way. And this point, loving adult children without losing your dignity, is often the most misunderstood. For years, parental love was constant action, solving, protecting, anticipating, holding everything together. But when children grow up, that same love, if it does not transform, begins to turn invasive or dependent. Many parents continue loving from the old role, expecting the same closeness, the same reciprocity, without realizing that the bond now needs a different shape. The problem is not loving too much, it is loving without updating the form. Epictetus taught that we must not confuse what depends on us with what does not. Love depends on you. The other person's response does not. When you keep giving from a place that expects something in return, love becomes contaminated with expectation. And when that expectation is not met, silent resentment appears, accumulated sadness, a sense of injustice. Loving with dignity means loving without demanding that the other fill your emptiness. Here an uncomfortable truth appears. Some children get used to parents who are always available, always understanding, always present, even when they are not. Not out of malice, but out of unconsciousness. And when there is never a visible emotional consequence, absence becomes normalized. Stoicism does not propose punishment or withdrawing with bitterness. It proposes something subtler and more powerful, stepping away from the place where there is no longer reciprocity without stopping loving. Loving with dignity means not chasing calls that do not come, not justifying silences that hurt you, not begging for attention under the excuse of affection. It means continuing with your life, your rhythm, your center, without closing your heart. Marcus Aurelius said that true strength is remaining firm without becoming hardened. That applies here more than ever. Before continuing, I want to make a brief pause. If this content resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe to this channel and leave a comment with your name and the country you are listening from. I always read the comments, and knowing where you connect from gives human meaning to this space we share. That said, let's return to the topic. Loving adult children with dignity does not break the bond, it redefines it. It shows them, without words, that love is not pursuit or silent sacrifice, but calm presence. And paradoxically, many times it is this change that awakens awareness in the other, not because you manipulate, but because you stopped erasing yourself to sustain something that no longer worked the same way. Setting boundaries is not building walls, it is stopping the blurring of yourself. And when children do not call or visit, this point becomes unavoidable, even if it feels uncomfortable. Because many parents confuse boundaries with punishment, when in reality a boundary is a mature form of self-care. In this fourth point, I want you to notice something essential. Not every silence from the other needs to be filled by your effort. For years you learned to hold things together, to adapt, to understand. That flexibility was necessary when your children were small. But in adulthood, continuing to function from the same place can make you invisible. Indifference, when it finds no inner boundary, expands. Not because the other is cruel, but because no one showed them where access ends and respect begins. Stoicism does not propose dramatic confrontations or emotionally charged complaints. It proposes coherence. A calm boundary is not announced, it is embodied. It is no longer being always available, no longer reorganizing your life around someone who does not organize theirs to see you. It is responding calmly, without reproach, but also without overgiving. Massimo Pigliucci often says that living with virtue means acting according to your values, even when no one applauds. Here, the value is self-respect. From psychology, we know that relationships are regulated by patterns, not speeches. You can explain how you feel 1,000 times, but if your behavior keeps saying, "I am always here, no matter what," that is the real message. The boundary appears when your actions begin to align with your dignity, not to provoke guilt in the other, but to stop betraying yourself. This may involve something as simple and as difficult as not calling first for a while, not insisting when there is no response, not justifying absences with excuses you invent yourself to avoid feeling pain. This is not coldness, it is emotional honesty. Viktor Frankl reminded us that whoever has a why can endure almost any how. Your why here is living without emotionally humiliating yourself. A calm boundary also implies accepting something hard. Maybe the other does not react immediately. Maybe they do not change. But your peace cannot depend on that. The boundary does not guarantee that they will call more. It guarantees something more important, that you do not lose yourself waiting. And when you recover that center, even the other's silence weighs less. Setting boundaries in the face of indifference does not break love. It breaks the dynamic that hurts you, and that, even if it hurts at first, is a deep form of self-care in maturity. When children pull away, the greatest risk is not loneliness, it is losing your center. Because for many years, your identity revolved around caring, being there, responding, holding things together. And when that suddenly stops, if you do not do conscious inner work, a sense of emptiness appears that has to do not only with them, but with you. This final point is key to closing the circle, reclaiming your center when your children pull away. Stoicism teaches something uncomfortable but liberating. We are not what happens to us, we are the way we respond to what happens. Your children may take distance, but your life does not have to be put on hold. And yet, Many parents become emotionally frozen, waiting for the bond to return to what it once was, postponing their own present in the name of a past that no longer exists. Here I want you to ask yourself an honest question. How much mental energy do you spend thinking about them, checking your phone, imagining scenarios, remembering how things used to be? That energy is not love. It is attachment to a role that has already changed. Viktor Frankl spoke about the responsibility to find meaning, even when something we love transforms or is lost. This is one of those moments. Reclaiming your center does not mean closing the door to your children. It means opening it toward yourself, returning to your life with dignity, with your own interests, routines that do not depend on a call. It means reconnecting with your identity beyond the parental role. Because when all your worth depends on whether they reach out or not, you become emotionally at the mercy of decisions you do not control. Paradoxically, when a person regains their balance, their presence changes. They stop emitting need and begin to emit calm. Marcus Aurelius said that the soul takes on the color of its thoughts. If your thoughts revolve only around absence, your life becomes absence. But if you begin to cultivate presence in what is under your control, something inside falls into place, even if the external bond does not change immediately. This point does not promise miracles. It does not promise that tomorrow your children will call more. It promises something deeper and more real, that your peace will not depend on that, that you can love without falling apart, be available without disappearing yourself, keep the door open without standing there watching the road all day. That is emotional maturity. That is Stoicism applied to real life. When you reclaim your center, silence hurts less, waiting dissolves, and love stops being an open wound and becomes a quiet strength. And from that place, whatever happens with your children, you are no longer lost. At this point, I want you to look at the entire journey we took together. We started with your children's silence, that silence that hurts because it is unexplained. And we learned to look at it without denying it or dramatizing it. Then, we dismantled guilt, that heavy burden so many parents carry believing it is love, when in reality it is a trap that steals energy and dignity. We moved toward a more mature way of loving, a love that does not chase or humiliate itself, that knows how to be present without disappearing. We talked about calm boundaries, not as punishment, but as a serene way of caring for yourself. And finally, we arrived at what matters most, reclaiming your center when your children pull away. None of this is easy. There are no quick formulas or magic phrases. There is inner work that hurts because it requires letting go of old images, outdated expectations, and roles that no longer function the same way. But there is also a profound gain. When you stop living glued to your phone, when your value stops depending on a call, something inside you straightens. Not because you stop loving, but because you begin to love yourself with the same respect you offered others for years. This channel exists for that. Not to give you comfortable answers, but to walk with you toward clarity, to choose with dignity, and to live with calm in a stage of life that often feels invisible. I am Gabriel, a fellow traveler who shares what he has learned from Stoicism, psychology, and the real experience of being a father and going through these changes. If this space adds value to your life, I am deeply grateful that you are here. Before we say goodbye, I invite you to leave a simple sentence in the comments. I keep choosing my dignity. It is a way to remind yourself and to remind each other that love does not have to hurt to be real. Thank you for your time, for your listening, and for your inner honesty. I will see you in the next video.